In this lesson, we're going to work on painting some branching coral with the paintbrush tool and also doing a little bit of sketching for our coral with the pencil tool. Okay, so you can see here that between this lesson and last lesson, I created a few new things. So went in with the blob brush tool and finished up that kind of spiky ball, made some tubular coral, kind of sketched up this cabbage coral, and this kind of rock, just made some shapes and then put a clipping mask on it to give it a little bit of texture, just a concrete texture that's in your project files, and then use the blob brush to kind of trace over some other images. Now you do have an image of this fish and this fish in actual picture if you want to go in and practice with your blob brush, just kind of painting over on top of those, just kind of like what we did when we were creating that spiky ball. So same exact technique there. So I want to go ahead now and show you how to use the pencil tool to create some branching coral effect. So go ahead and open up your layers panel. We're just going to click on this layer I've created here. I've locked all my other layers except for this empty one. And I'm just going to come up here, grab my pencil tool, and then we'll just kind of start drawing some really just organic feeling lines here. So I'm just going to kind of move in here like this. And you see that whenever those overlap, it kind of changes it. So I want to make sure that I'm not overlapping these. I'm just getting really close. Just like that. So you can see if you get too close, it's still going to cause that to kind of switch it to a new path. So just trying to anticipate what you're wanting it to do. So I'm just going to kind of keep making these. You can see just kind of how they branch from one to the next. And then we'll come in and kind of unify them a little bit more later on. But for now, we'll just work on, getting those branches the way we want them to be. Okay, so now that we have that kind of set up, just have, sort of a branching thing made here, I'm going to come in with my the width tool. So go ahead and select that width tool, and then I'm just going to come down here to this point and pull this out. So you can see kind of how that allows me to change the width at one end of the stroke and leave it small at the other end. So that's really going to help to make this look more realistic as whenever the width changes, as this gets higher and higher. So you can really start to make this look a lot more realistic just with that very small change. So I'll just come in here and kind of keep working on that just like this. Just kind of pulling those out. Probably want to start on some of the ones that are closer here towards the bottom and then just work your way up. Okay, so once you're happy with the way that those look, you can come in here and kind of just drag them onto that path, so now they actually look like they're connected and you don't have to worry about it, creating that kind of unification that you're not wanting, where it takes the whole thing and puts it all as one path. So just a little bit of finessing to get that kind of all back where you want it. And once we have this part finished up, we'll be able to go in here and add some more other pieces that are going to be smaller. So I'm going to go ahead and select this. We'll come over here to our layers panel. Let's go ahead and just group this. So hit Control G to group. And you can see now that's all in one group. And I'm going to come down here and just lock that. And then we'll draw the rest of this on top of here. So now let's try working with our paintbrush tool. And I'm going to try to use kind of an interesting stroke for this. So I'm going to come over here to my brushes. We'll click that and come down here to where you see Brush Libraries menu. And I'm going to choose Artistic. And we're going to choose Ink. And that's going to give us a few different brushes here to choose from. And I'm going to just kind of come in here and let's play around with some of these. So I want to choose one that has that dark look to it so that it's not going to be changing my color. And so I'm just going to choose this one kind of second from the bottom there. And then I'm just going to start going in and kind of creating more just smaller secondary strokes here that have, you know, if we're using this paintbrush, they have a lot more of that organic feel to them because they do have, you know, just such a small thing happening here at the top. Just looks very painterly. And we'll just kind of create a few more of those here. Just kind of getting that down. And once you've created enough of these that you're happy with them, you can come in and start maybe making them a little bit smaller. So, you know, this is sitting at 1 point, but we can still make it smaller than that. So if I put that at a 0.5, you know, that feels like that just fits a lot better with this part of that little twig in the coral. So I'm going to come in and just kind of make several of these smaller just so that it looks a little bit more varied. And once you're sitting at 1 point, you can't go smaller just by clicking that down arrow. So you'll want to come in and actually start to change those manually for those point weights there. So I'm just kind of moving through really quickly, trying to get as many of those as I can. And you can still do the same technique that I just showed you with the pencil tool. So we could grab that pencil tool again and just kind of start creating a few more of these. And then we'll just select that. We'll take that back up to maybe a 1 or a 2. And just kind of creating a few more pieces. And then you can go back in and kind of add them later. So if you want to have something that feels, you know, like it's a little bit finer detail, you certainly can do that. And, you know, you may not even want to go back in and connect them. You might want to just kind of leave that up to the imagination, just letting that look like they kind of are all part of each other. Maybe that is a part that is, you know, coming from a different direction. Maybe the lighting is kind of playing on it. So it's, you know, it's already vector. So it's going to be more abstract than something that would look totally real anyway. So that's definitely up to you how you want to handle that. But there's just several options that you can do for painting different things like this inside of Illustrator that are still going to give you those nice vector lines, and give you the flexibility of scaling up. And then at the same time, you get this nice painterly feel that you can achieve if you're working with pixels. So kind of the best of both worlds, just knowing how to actually use those tools. So you can kind of see where this is going, and some of these branches might be a little bit thick. So this one here, to me, I think maybe still looks a little bit thick. So maybe come in there, make that a little bit smaller again. So you just have to hover over that area and then pull that back in. And then I would probably want to come in and fix that on the other branches as well. But you kind of can just see how you can use several different techniques together to get a coral that looks, you know, believable, and it has a very different feel from the more organic things that we've made with our blob brush so far. And also even from tracing with that pen tool, you know, you get a different look just depending on what tool you're using. So really quickly, I want to show you how to create a brain coral really easily by using some of our Pathfinder options. So I'm going to come over here, grab my ellipse tool, and I'm just going to kind of draw sort of a rock here, just a really basic kind of boring looking rock. And I'm going to go ahead and exit out of the brush panel there. And this actually we may want to put on its own layer. So let's just go ahead, create a new layer, and we'll lock that coral layer just so we're not bothered by that. Let's make sure that that goes on the new red layer. Just Control-Shift-V to paste that in place. And I'm just going to kind of eyedropper from one of these gradients that you see over here just to make that easier. So we'll just grab that eyedropper tool and click right there. And now what I want to do is kind of create just a pattern. So I'm going to create a circle. And so I just have a really small circle in comparison to this larger one, and I'm going to hold down Alt and hit the down arrow key, and this is just creating lots of those little circles kind of over and over. And now I'm just grabbing one and dragging it straight down, and I'll select all of them and grab my Align panel, and we'll just use this vertical distribute bottom option. And you can see now they've all kind of been pulled out. I don't really want quite that many. I want to be able to see the outlines of the circles, so I'll keep kind of moving those. That's getting a little bit better. And just deleting them until I'm happy with the amount and the way that they're distributed. So really, you don't have to hold it down for that long to get a nice amount of those dots. Okay, so that's a pretty good amount. And now I'm just going to hold Alt and Shift and kind of start dragging those over to duplicate them. And I'm just selecting more each time, so it's kind of just doubling its numbers every single time. And I'm not too worried about this being an absolutely perfect grid, but just doing it by hand is still, you know, getting me a pretty good result. So I'm going to go ahead and group those together. And then I'm just going to lay them on top of this shape here. So you can kind of see how this already, just using those gradients, gives that a pretty interesting look. Okay, so what I want to do is use my Pathfinder to subtract these circles from my big circle. So I'm going to select everything, and we'll just come over here to the Pathfinder, and I'm going to use the shape mode minus front. So if I just click that, you can see that just cut all those little pieces out of my main piece. So now I'm going to take this and let's just turn this upside down so we have our gradient going from the other direction, and maybe sample from a different piece. So this has gradients, so go ahead and use one of those. And I'm just going to make this slightly smaller and just kind of place it on top. So now we kind of have an offset here. And maybe something else we could do is create another set of those dots just really quickly. So just really quickly, let's go ahead and take those. Just same technique as what we did before with the Align panel. And duplicating them, and then maybe put these just slightly farther apart. You could also, you know, have just duplicated the one I made originally, and then, you know, just kind of played with the way that those were distributed. So I'll select them all, group them, and then let's place this on top of our other shape, and maybe we could kind of twist that a little bit. And we'll select this piece that's underneath, and we'll do that same subtract. So now you can see that those dots are way more erratic looking, and the whole thing feels a lot different. And just, you know, if you're kind of zoomed out, this just feels like a really interesting looking piece of coral, but it still has quite a bit of detail. Maybe we could make one more shape, and this time we can eyedrop from this green, and we'll send that to the back. So now we kind of have, you know, something that looks a little bit interesting here and just feels like, you know, just one of those other pieces that we've been creating all along. So it can just kind of go up there with those other pieces of coral, and, you know, just really simple, easy to make just by using those different shape tools together. So in this lesson, we learned how to use a few different brushes to create branching coral. We also learned how to use the Align panel and the Pathfinder panel to create some brain coral just by using shapes to cut out pieces from other shapes. So hopefully that gives you a really broad spectrum of different ways that you can create lots of different pieces of coral. And in our next lesson, we're going to talk about how to create cohesive icon illustrations that just really exemplify some of the things that we're talking about that causes destruction for corals. So stick around and we'll talk about how to create some of those in our next lesson.